Hello, everybody. This is Big Jim again. I'm going to do another reading from my new book, The Sterile Earth. It's a post-apocalyptic look at what happens if finally humans stop giving birth. No more babies. What happens to humanity and the planet? Today, I'm on chapter 2, the 25-year plan. It's my take on who the bad guy would be or could be. This is just my science fiction version of potential problem with humans giving birth. Chapter 2, the 25-year plan. In 2024, the war on terror ended with a whimper. Long after the coalition of nations broke up and hid behind their borders, U.S. President Joe Biden withdrew all troops from Afghanistan ahead of a detailed and agreed-upon schedule. It would have been easy to keep it and would have allowed the elected Afghan government time to backfill departing U.S. troops and maintain order as the American military made a planned strategic withdrawal. But the withdrawal happened nearly instantly. President Biden pulled the plug and left. He declared victory and withdrew in defeat. Even as the troops fled, the dominoes of democracy began to fall behind them. Back home in the States, it was a shit show. Half of the old USA didn't believe it was a victory, but the other half were in charge and would not hear a single negative word about their president and his accomplishments. They shouted from the rooftops, "We won." It was the first of many lies spewed, costing the Democrats the presidential election of November of 2024. Months before the U.S. primaries, the Republicans saw an obvious, easy win. As the opposition party, they ran a familiar face. A clown who'd previously held the office of president for 4 years. A loud, angry man who ended up with a solid 51% of voters. Many Republicans like myself were not a fan of President Trump, but most also believed he was better than the other guy running. I know, it's a terrible reason to vote for someone. After the bungled Afghan withdrawal, within a week, the duly elected Democratic government of Afghanistan fell apart completely. Every elected or appointed person in the country was murdered by the emboldened religious fundamentalists. The world sat and watched as their women were tossed back into the Stone Age in burqas and beatings to enforce immediate obedience. The religious ruling council deemed no woman could be more educated than her husband, father, or brothers. If found to be so, off to Allah they went. It was quick and dirty, and it was condemned by the world, even by neighboring moderate Muslim countries. Many women had to pretend to be ignorant and illiterate to save their own lives and the lives of their female children, some who had attended school and were still not of marrying age. This weird limbo meant silence, and feigned ignorance was the only thing keeping educated young girls from a bullet, a sword, or a noose. President Biden did nothing about the carnage. Former President Trump, now the 2024 presidential nominee for the Republican Party, hammered the Biden-Harris ticket with a fiery rhetoric, blasting them for their terrible decisions, and much of it stuck. Eventually, the Democratic Party saw how ineffectual Biden was. His mental and physical decline was obvious to the world now, and the Democratic Party tossed him off the ticket against his will and ran the sitting Vice President Kamala Harris for president, and some forgettable idiot from Minnesota for vice president. According to the consistent poll numbers, Harris was the most hated elected official in the U.S., and this ensured Trump's return to the White House. Winning handily, Trump's famous combination of isolationism, tariffs, and harsh criticism, anyone who had anything negative to say about his administration wore thin quickly. His constant saber rattling entered the daily news feed, but was mostly toothless. Trump's idiotic claims about other leaders and the issues he had with them and the rest of the world and how they ran their own countries were doing more harm than good. It was a terrible time to have access to the internet. Trump had the big chair and a microphone, and no one could shut him up. President Trump did make an immediate effort to correct Biden's bumbling withdrawal from Afghanistan, but it was too late. No amount of money was going to put the cat back in the bag as long as Trump insisted he would not commit troops to retake the country. Nothing could be done for the worsening situation in Afghanistan. The speed of the Biden Afghan withdrawal was so easy because not one piece of heavy military equipment was taken. All of it was left behind for the Afghan people and the new Revolutionary Army to wage war, suppress rebellion, or sell outright. They chose to sell it all. The U.S. military's best equipment armed and funded an Islamic army of zealots, eventually killing billions of people in a week. The radicals had learned many things about the war on terror, but most importantly, they'd learned no electronic device was truly secure. If it had a cellular signal, a radio, internet, or Wi-Fi, someone somewhere was listening, recording, and tracking all what was being said, who said it, and where they went when they said it. In most cases, the US, Israel, and others could also record even when the device was turned off. This meant everyone had a surveillance bug in their pocket, their bag, or on their wrist. Modern cars, electronics, and appliances were also now unwilling tools of the spy trade. The solution for the radicals was not to go dark and force the West to try something else, but to use the electronics in a disinformation campaign and to feed them useless garbage intel, while a real long-term plan was put into place: how to burn the West to the ground. Instituting face-to-face negotiations only, the radicals worked out a plan to wipe out the West. They used dummy agents, false flight plans, and dropped hints to put those who listened off their tracks and down blind alleys. They planned the nuclear attack of 2050 by only meeting in person around the world. It took them 25 years, but it worked all too well. Led at first by Afghan Islamic ruling council, the radicals valiantly blamed the US and the West for their infertility problems openly, but they took their time to plan and execute their revenge. The provisional government did not want tanks and helicopters. They wanted nuclear weapons and a way to deliver them across the globe to all who stood in their way of the caliphate, world domination, and revenge. First and foremost was Israel, their sworn enemy and frequent target. According to the radicals, Israel only survived this long because of the second larger enemy, America, followed closely by Canada, Russia, France, and Spain. Each of these countries had a large Jewish population or stood in the way physically or militarily of the caliphate and holy war. Their dream was to destroy them all at once. An idea was hatched in the mountains of Afghanistan, and they wanted to use the abandoned U.S. military equipment to raise cash to buy real weapons, nuclear weapons, but to do it quietly, slowly, and to build up a force to eliminate their enemies in one swift, huge strike. But where do you get enough nukes to destroy the West? At first, they investigated the old rumors and the propaganda, but upon closer inspection, it all turned out to be completely true. In 1991, at the end of the Cold War, Russia had at least 24 vassal states with nuclear weapons on their soil, and each of them wanted to break away from the old Soviet system, and they wanted to keep the nuclear weapons they possessed. Each of them competed to be a nuclear power on the world stage, and every responsible country on the earth wanted to stop them. Russia took many of the weapons back by force, but they were still reeling from the fall of the USSR and didn't have enough money or infrastructure to deal with more than 24 potential nuclear powers at their borders. Eventually, Russia turned to the West for help. NATO and others quickly agreed, and with very little coordination or communication, the US, Russia, Israel, China, France, and England all started buying or stealing anything nuclear related on the black market. The 24 rogue, capable countries all had one issue. Without Soviet backing, money, and support, they were dead broke. After 50 years of bribes and handouts from the Soviet masters, the ruling parties of the former Eastern Bloc nations were in deep trouble when the cash and troops were cut off. When the Western nations came calling, looking to buy their nukes, many of the former Soviet states jumped at the chance to make big money and free themselves from the threat and attacks of their northern neighbor by getting rid of the hotly contested weapons immediately. Russia privately said they'd lost only 24 nukes and the control components needed to arm and launch them. No one believed them. Estimates later thought it to be over 300 small, medium, and large nukes were on the black market or simply hidden away. Someone even suggested a Tsar bomb was missing. The largest nuclear weapon ever built and tested, the Tsar bomb was the dream of terrorists everywhere. A staggering 60-plus megatons, 1,000 times more powerful than Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. A nightmare weapon could be loose on the world. Russia would neither confirm or deny the Tsar bomb's very existence. Eventually, NATO, Russia, and others started to talk to each other about the crisis in more detail, and they decided the best idea was to continue to buy all the nukes in more coordinated effort and to return them to Russia for proper storage or disposal. That cooperation never happened. Those countries capable of buying them did, but they kept them and learned how to improve their own weapons and how to potentially defeat the Russian nuclear weapons. Once again, no one trusted anyone, and self-serving organizations went their own way, endangering everyone. Coordination was only imaginary, and the problem-solving was nil. This attitude could eventually kill us all. After the fall of the USSR, the US alone bought 41 nuclear weapons on the black market at a huge cost of $780 billion, thoroughly destroying the Russian claim of only 24 lost nukes. Israel stole 4 nukes. Spain and the UK each got hold of 3. The big surprise was an unknown player. Pakistan purchased at least 6 of the Soviet-era nukes. They said it was solely for self-defense against India, who'd already had nuclear weapons for years, and they swore this nuclear arsenal was only a deterrent against an increasingly hostile neighbor. Pakistan promised its weapons were only to be used as a last-ditch effort in self-defense if attacked or invaded. Both countries, sworn enemies, now had nuclear weapons pointed at each other. From 1993 to 2050, the border between these two was the most dangerous plot of land on Earth, considered by many to be the likely place to light a fuse for a nuclear war. We were wrong. After America's ill-fated and hasty withdrawal, Afghanistan was left with the best tanks, helicopters, armor, and small arms the world had ever seen, ready to sell to the highest bidder. Only Indonesia wanted it all. They were already on everyone's international terrorist watch list, but no one saw what was coming. Indonesia wanted it all to the last bullet, and they had the cash raised from drugs and human trafficking to close the deal. One of the largest Muslim countries on earth, with over 250 million faithful followers in 2030, Indonesia would quickly and quietly become the most dangerous radical Muslim country on earth. Between Afghanistan and Indonesia, an accommodation was reached and a cabal was formed. The two countries had the same goal, and they were going to work together to complete it. Indonesia sold the newly acquired small arms and tanks to the Philippine guerrilla fighters. Chinese separatists who bought fully armed attack helicopters, and the Tibetan militia had the money to buy 10,000 M4 rifles and all the ammo a soldier could carry. Each country, buying from the cabal, was unknowingly providing the cash needed to purchase nuclear weapons to fund a global holocaust. So many hidden nuclear weapons appeared for sale when all this cash was unleashed from a non-Western source. The floodgates opened up. The pocketbooks were wrung out. The radical Muslims asked their faithful followers to donate millions to the cause, giving the cabal the unlimited cash to buy black market nukes. To cover their tracks, the Indonesians bought the nukes through many third parties. One infamous buyer was the corrupt VP of South Korea. Another was a member of the Saudi royal family. A few wealthy dictators later, and most of the nukes needed to wipe out the West were secured and hidden. By 2035, the cabal had stashed away over 150 nukes around the world, all of it done off the grid and face-to-face transactions. Anyone could be a frontman as long as they didn't ask a lot of questions. They were used, they were paid handsomely for it. All this to hide the real owners, a huge, angry Islamic cabal run by a madman. Sheikh Zudan Arif Farouk, the Sheikh, was the de facto leader of the cabal in 2035. Originally a lowly cabinet minister in the Indonesian government with no position of power, but he had a mesmerizing voice and a message his countrymen wanted to hear. He rose to prominence quickly during one of the many governmental restructurings of the 2030s, code words for the coup d'etat. He used violent rhetoric and half-baked plan of the others to steer the cabal and to push public agenda of isolationism. But privately, the Sheikh called for holy war and world dominance. He hid his truth better than any radical leader before him. That's a great place to stop for right now. We're going to continue on tomorrow with another one, and I will see you later.